All right, everyone. Today we are diving into a huge topic, something that's really at the core of any modern democracy, election integrity. But we're going to approach it from a very specific angle. Think of it like this. Securing an election today is basically fighting a three-front war. You're up against this perfect storm of threats that are targeting our physical voting machines, the people who run our elections, and, maybe most importantly, our trust in the whole system.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll do a quick history lesson on how computers got into the ballot box in the first place. Then, we're going to break down those three fronts of the battle: the physical stuff, the people and public perception, and then the new kid on the block that's making everything harder: artificial intelligence. And finally, we'll look at what the experts say we can actually do about it. So let's get into it.
So you might be asking, how did we get here? For most of American history, voting was a pretty straightforward mechanical process. Levers, paper, punch cards. But that all changed, and it changed fast, right around the turn of the century. And it was all because of one single piece of law. And this is it. This is the moment everything changed: the Help America Vote Act of 2002, or HAVA. Now, it came from a really good place. The goal was to make voting easier and more accessible for everyone. So the federal government offered up money for states to buy new, shiny, computerized equipment. But, and this is a big but, it had this massive unintended consequence. It pushed thousands of small, local election offices into the digital age. And in doing so, it opened up a whole new can of worms when it comes to digital security risks. And that brings us right to the first front in this war: the physical assets. We're talking about the actual tangible stuff, the hardware and the software that we trust to count our votes correctly. Now, to really get the risks here, you have to appreciate just how complex this whole process is. It's not like you just flip a switch on election day. No way. It's a whole workflow. It starts way before, with voter registration databases. Then you have to program what the ballot's even going to look like. Then you've got to set up every single machine. And after the voting, you've got to process all the ballots and then tally and report the results. The key takeaway here is that a weakness in any one of these steps, just one weak link in that chain, could potentially compromise the entire election. And here's a closer look at where those weak links can be. Security researchers have spent years picking these things apart. For example, those touchscreen machines, they're called DREs. Well, their memory could theoretically be altered, and it would leave behind very little evidence. Or take optical scanners, the ones that read your paper ballot. Their software could be manipulated to misread the marks. Even the special devices for accessibility could be hacked to print a ballot that doesn't quite match what the voters selected. And then you have the big one, the back-end election management systems. These are the computers that run the whole show, and they're often connected to a network, which makes them a prime target. Okay, so here's where it gets really complicated. Because even if we could invent perfectly secure, unhackable technology, it's still not enough. Not anymore. The battle for election integrity has now spilled over onto two other very different fronts: the human front and the reputational front. This quote absolutely nails it. The complexity we're talking about isn't just about computer code. It's logistical, it's human. We have this incredibly decentralized system in the US, run by thousands of separate local offices, all with different resources and procedures. That operational messiness creates a whole new world of vulnerabilities that has nothing to do with software. This is where a framework from the RAND Corporation is so useful. They argue that to have a successful election, you have to protect three totally different kinds of assets. We've talked about the first one, the physical assets, the machines and databases. But you also have to secure the human assets. We're talking about the election officials, the volunteers, everyone involved. And then there's the third, and maybe the most fragile, the reputational assets. That's just a fancy way of saying public confidence. You can have a perfect technical election, but if nobody believes the result, what have you really accomplished? An attack on any one of these is an attack on the election itself.
And wow, when you look at that third asset, the reputational one, you can see the damage right here. This poll from 2022 shows this massive partisan gap in trust. You see 85% of Democrats feeling confident in the election's accuracy, but only 40% of Republicans. Now, whatever the reasons for that are, the gap itself is the vulnerability. It means public trust has become another battlefield in this whole conflict.
All right, so you've got vulnerable machines, you've got attacks on election workers, and you've got eroding public trust. So what could possibly accelerate this perfect storm? Well, here it is. We're now facing a revolutionary new weapon that can attack all three of those fronts at the same time: artificial intelligence. AI is basically like pouring gasoline on this fire. This is the absolute key. We are talking about a huge paradigm shift here. This isn't just about more fake news or those clumsy posts you'd see from troll farms.
Generative AI lets anyone create disinformation that is way more sophisticated, way more personal, and just way more believable than anything we have ever seen before. And think about the sheer power of this tool. In one study, researchers took known disinformation talking points and just fed them as prompts to ChatGPT 3.5. 80% of the time, 80, it successfully produced these eloquent, convincing, and completely false stories. That's how easy it's become to mass produce lies that look like the truth.
This comparison really spells it out. The old way of doing this, it took people, it took time, it was labor intensive. The new AI-powered way, it's cheap, it's automated, it scales infinitely. And it's not just text anymore. It can create content that sounds authentic in any language, and it can create images, audio, and scarily realistic videos, deepfakes. This just blows the doors wide open for anyone who wants to launch a major influence operation. So I know this can all feel pretty overwhelming. A three-front war, supercharged by AI, it sounds grim. But the research doesn't just stop at the problem, it also points to a path forward. There are strategic things we can do to defend our democratic process. It really boils down to a proactive, multi-layered defense. First, public awareness. We have to get better, all of us, at spotting fakes and understanding how these campaigns work. Second, government has to step up. That means more resources from the federal level down to the local level to secure systems and, critically, to protect the actual human beings who run our elections. And third, we have to start planning for the unexpected. That means using strategic gaming, basically war games for elections, to practice responding to new and combined threats before they actually happen. So we'll end on this question because it really gets to the root of everything we've been talking about. We know the code in the machines can be made to lie. And now, with AI, the text, the images, the videos we see online can also be incredibly convincing lies. So this isn't just a technical problem anymore. It's a much deeper, more fundamental question about who and what we choose to trust in this new digital age. Thank you.